Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar discussion topic. This one is going to be more discussion on the big news from yesterday that Mike and Bryan have both left the Avatar Netflix live action show and will have no further involvement in it, and they're even going as far as to say that whatever show that comes out, it will not be what their vision of it was. They've left basically because of creative differences and more or less the idea that Netflix told them at the start they were going to be the showrunners, the executive producers, but in reality it never felt like they were kind of given that role, and so there wasn't as much of a sense that they were actually able to run the show the way they wanted to. So they've decided to leave, and they're saying that they're going to be committed to Avatar going forward in terms of continuing to, be involved in the universe. I guess mainly the publishing side of things for now, but we'll discuss that. And yeah, my reaction to this primarily was actually discussing it more from the perspective of how it hits the rest of the franchise, and it ultimately still is, because I've never particularly had an interest in this show. I've never felt that this was a thing that was going to be like what we needed as a fandom at this stage. And I've had that opinion since the show was first announced. Since I did that video like a year ago covering my full thoughts on why this show does not interest me at all. The gist of it basically being that I think shows that do the animation to live action adaptation, it rarely if ever works out. Secondly, I'm not exactly sure what they were trying to accomplish. Were they trying to create a completely new continuity and have this be the focus? Or were they just trying to drive up popularity for Avatar full stop? Well, what happened just a few months ago proved that you don't need to do a big live action production to make that happen. We already got a massive spike. The fandom is back. Popularity is hugely up in Avatar over the last few months, simply because Avatar The Last Airbender came back to Netflix. The show that ended in 2008, just being put back up on Netflix, a platform that so many people have, reignited the fan base. It's so difficult to buy most of the books, the comics and stuff like that, because they keep selling out. Because people are getting back into Avatar and getting back into Avatar hardcore, buying the merchandise, buying the books, novels and so on, and that's fantastic. And it's just proof that the fandom is still here, and if you deliver good content, we're here for it, and we'll buy it, we'll get invested in it. And so I'm almost even more doubly glad that they've left this show, because now the creators are sort of free to work on the franchise and the aspects of the franchise that we care about, but now really fully knowing that fandom is here. If we deliver something, we can really, capitalize on that popularity. And look, I know a lot of people have immediately jumped on the idea that this means third Avatar animated series incoming, and I'm kind of maybe in a year or two I can maybe see us starting to hear rumors about something like that. I struggle right now with the idea that it's going to happen very quickly, simply because they only left the show about 2 months ago, and and just because we're still in the virus, we're still dealing with the effects of that, I struggle to believe that they've managed to organize a whole third series being approved and stuff like that with Nickelodeon, which I guess is going to have to be the thing if they go for a third series, because I don't think there's any way they leave a Netflix live action show to immediately start working on a Netflix animated show for Avatar. As much as a lot of people would probably prefer it be through Netflix, this experience would probably make them be actually, maybe Nickelodeon was kind of slightly better to deal with, because ultimately we got 2 successful shows out of it. Now, Korra obviously had its production problems in part due to Nickelodeon and their interference. But you almost get the impression that Nickelodeon for the most part let Mike and Bryan do what they wanted to and just had some restrictions in place, whereas it felt like Netflix fully were restricting what they wanted to do. And especially now, Nick have to see that there's such a popularity for Avatar, that this franchise that is so much bigger than so much of what they have. that it would be in their best interest to confirm another series and just give Mike and Bryan sort of free reign to more or less do what they want. How much confidence do I have in that? I'm not sure. So they're my thoughts when it comes to just like the big one of like, they're free. You get the sense they almost want to prove themselves after this project didn't quite work out. They want to do something big for Avatar potentially. Why not another animated series? So let's just very quickly do some speculation on that. Okay, let's say in about a year or two, we get news that yes, Nickelodeon has confirmed there is going to be another Avatar animated series. Where should it be set? What format should it have? So on. My thoughts on that would be that I think they shouldn't do the Avatar after Korra, nor should they go particularly too far into the future. I think that's a mistake. I think Korra should be your series that is sort of expanding the future reaches of the franchise. Because if you do decide to do the Earth Avatar after Korra, you are straight away creating the exact same situation that we have now with the gap between Avatar and Korra. Whereas this unknown period where we really want to know what happens, but that they're sort of unwilling to explore. If you do that, you just create that era again, and now all of a sudden you have the idea of the same sort of conflict that you had when you did Korra, which was, why isn't this book 4 of Avatar? And for this one, you're going to have that as well, where why isn't this book 4 of Avatar, or why isn't this, like, say, book 5 of Korra? Why are you not continuing either of those shows? Why are you doing just the one afterwards? I don't think they'll want to do that. So, to me, what they should do is use the fact that they already have a very large time period already in play. Most of it unexplored, because from Wan to Avatar Zito, you have pretty much like 9,000 plus years, like in or around 9,000 years to deal with, where we basically know nothing that happens. And it will be a return to the universe more as we sort of expect it, this more traditional style of stuff, and you could do something very different. You could still do your Earth Avatar, it's just an Earth Avatar from the past, and you can explore things where the world is slightly different, especially if you set it closer to beginnings than you do to like Kyoshi's era or whatever. You can make the world very, very different, and a lot of the stuff that we sort of are very aware is in the world right now may not be in it back in whatever era you choose to set it in. That's the direction I would want them to go in. But at the same time, I'd be relatively okay if they did that style of story just as a new novel or as a new comic series. It doesn't, to me, have to be the new animated series. So they're my thoughts on that. Like, if we ever do get confirmation there will be a third animated series, you can be sure it is not going to be a direct Avatar continuation, and it's not going to be a direct Korra continuation. That is not the way Mike and Bryan tend to work. As much as their work on the live action series sort of contradicts that in terms of them not wanting to like go over the same story again, or just be sort of forced into telling a specific story, I think very clearly the reason they never did a Korra book 4 is because they didn't feel that they needed to, an Avatar book 4 is because they just creatively didn't want to do that. They want to do unique things. Animations are such a massive production that they have to be so passionate about the story that they're telling. And if it's just like, let's fill in the gap just for the sake of filling in the gap, that's maybe not the thing that they're most passionate about compared to, say, exploring a completely different aspect of the world. That's where I would want them to go. That way you are so far removed from everything that you don't have really any of the connections to the other stuff. So you immediately remove the idea of like, oh, but it's close enough to Avatar. Why can't the Avatar characters kind of be more involved in this? Like was sort of the case with Korra. In this case, it's like, yeah, none of the characters that you're aware of like should really be around during this period, outside of maybe some ancient spirits. So I think that's the idea there. But like I said, I don't think a third series is going to be a thing, or that should be really on a lot of Avatar fans' minds really right now. I think it's far too soon after they've left the show for that to immediately jump into production. So I do feel that the more of the impact that we'll see more recently coming up sooner, with Mike and Bryan not working on the show anymore, will be probably maybe a slight increase in publishing, or at the least an increase in quality of publishing. Because if you note the way things are right now, where like Core Comics just seem like they're in this weird kind of break time, kind of hiatus type thing, that we're just waiting for the next announcement that still hasn't come. And we're waiting to see, is it going to continue to be Mike as the writer or not? Avatar Comics, of course, are in this also sort of weird holding pattern where we're not continuing the story post-Imbalance anymore, and we're just telling these one-shot stories. That feels very weird, especially because Mike and Bryan's names are not included as like the collaborators on those books. And then The Shadow of Kyoshi was the second of a 2-book deal with Abrams Books. There are no new novels announced. They could announce more anytime they want, I suppose, but we have no news about that right now. And it all felt quite like, oh no, the next few years of Avatar could be very light on content just with the way things are going. And Mike and Bryan are still working on the live action show. Things could get pretty bad here if they just don't have the time to work on the publishing side of things. But now it seems like they do. And while it may only be like a slight shift, I think it is notable that like they're coming back in with the publishing side of things, where you have your Avatar comics, you have your core comics, but you also have novels. And, you know, that was something they didn't really have in place back when they first started working on the live action show. Core comics had only like just started, and Avatar comics were still going, of course. Now you have like 3 pillars basically to deal with. And so that would place a lot more of a time commitment on them, even if they are just fulfilling supervising roles on all these projects. Now it feels like, okay, they have the time to write a comic at the same time as they're assisting on Avatar comics, at the same time as they're assisting on novels, and potentially other stuff as well. I think it does open the door to stuff like that. And like I said, I think potentially coming off like this sort of kind of project that didn't work out for them, I can see sort of a want from them to really show that they can deliver with whatever their next, you know, Avatar thing is that they're directly working on. So that's why I'm just hoping that we do see that sooner rather than later, and potentially get something like, oh, what if actually Mike was the one to write the next Avatar novel? He's wrote novels before with his Rebel Genius series. Similarly, like with Bryan, like he's probably the one like you've seen sort of like not really feel like he's as involved in Avatar over the last few years, because like we haven't really heard too much about like his assistance on the art direction side of things with the comics, and you don't typically see him be sort of mentioned all that much as being sort of the story collaborator that Mike is. So we might see him come more heavily back into things on the story side of things, on the art side of things, and that he obviously, his big project was that he was planning that Thread World graphic novel series. Is he going to come back to that now? Or maybe, what if we saw Bryan as like a comic artist? What if he came on board and just decided to do an Avatar comic? What a big announcement that would be. Mike on writing, Bryan on art, Avatar comic. That'd be a cool idea, even if it was just like a one-off. To see the creators just do a comic would be great in my mind. So again, it's a lot of sort of hoping for stuff to happen. We don't know for sure that this is exactly the way things are going to play out. But I look at their statements and the fact that they both specifically mention that we are still committed to working on Avatar and, you know, this universe that we trust. It makes me feel like, you know, they're going to double down. They're really going to try as hard as they can to deliver some good Avatar stuff coming up. Especially when I think most fans can agree it's been fairly light on content the last couple of years, and if not for the 2 novels, which was sort of a kind of out of the blue announcement when it happened, and still feel like this very unique thing in the Avatar franchise, that until they get confirmed to be more of a regular thing, you know, you take out the novels from the past few years, we've got very little from Dark Horse, because there's been books like Team Avatar Tales that just came and went, like completely missed. Imbalance didn't really capture people that well. I would say Turf Wars as the first core comic, while like it was popular and it sold well, plot-wise didn't work as well. Ruins of the Empire thankfully got things back on track and was a big marked improvement. But then the Avatar comic switching to one-shots right at the point where it felt like you have to do, the next thing has to really deliver, and we're back to this. That's sort of the what's going on here. That's where it feels like, do Dark Horse have some plans in place? Like that Rachel Roberts interview when she mentioned that like fans of Avatar and Korra will both be happy. We have lots of different formats and stuff like that coming out for fans of both Avatar and Korra. We haven't seen another Korra book announced. And the new format thing was clearly the one-shots, but she did say formats plural. So what are they talking about? And especially in the last couple of months where potentially like maybe Mike and Bryan knew for a while before they properly left the show that they were going to leave and maybe put more effort into the other stuff. Maybe there is some more stuff in the planning. We'll have to, of course, wait and see on that. But the main thing is just that I feel more confident about things improving on the publishing side of things for Avatar now coming out of this announcement. And while, yes, as ever, I've never been particularly interested in the live action show, it doesn't particularly change my opinion on it. Like, it's still going to be this show that I'll cover the big news when it comes out. When the show actually is released, I will do some sort of review content. And I was planning on doing that in the first place when Mike and Bryan were on board. But the difference now is that I feel a lot more at ease and relaxed about the show, whereas I had a lot of worries about it when it was still Mike and Bryan on board. Because one of the premises of this was that they were going to like expand the story of Avatar The Last Airbender, I was very worried about what changes would be made in terms of new scenes added in and how we interpret that, and what does that mean for canon that the live action show has this scene but it's not in the animation or the comics. All that sort of confusion now goes out the window because the creators aren't involved. Whatever they make is not going to be canon. It's just this adaptation done by other people. And while it's, I suppose, official still, it's just this completely different continuity. And that just takes such a weight off my shoulders in a way for just like, great. We can focus on the comics and the books as being the stuff to expand the universe. And this is just this extra thing where, pretty much like Mike and Bryan said in their post, if the people working on the show that are still working on it make a decent show, great. If the bad show, who cares, you know? It's just this thing. It's just another Avatar thing that I don't particularly have a great interest in. And if it turns out to be good, fine. That's my take on it right now. That we now have the people who are sort of key to making the publishing content better not working on that show, and I think that's going to work out pretty well for us going forward. It just it increases my confidence that things can improve, because I have been complaining quite a bit in the last few years that just things have been slowing down, and while the novels have been this big boost, it looks like we are potentially not going to have that novel for, like, say, next year. 2021 I feel could be a very weak year if they don't have a lot planned, if they don't make some announcements soon. So maybe we have to accept that next year will be quite light, but that the hope would be that Mike and Bryan are now able to work more heavily on Avatar, and so going into, say, like 2022, 2023, there's bigger stuff at play for Avatar. And, you know, at that point, we're approaching 10 years since the end of Legend of Korra. Maybe another series is on the horizon. And so there's just that slight hope now, and that's the way I view it. I did a bit of speculation about a third series here, but ultimately the way I view this is that, okay, the door is now slightly open, I think, towards a third series, but we're a long way away from actually, I think, properly hearing rumors about that or it actually happening. But I'd love to be surprised. I'd love to find out in a few months that, oh, it's already in play, it's already in planning. But I don't think that's going to be the case, at least this soon. So yeah, they're my sort of further thoughts on basically the results of this information of Mike and Bryan leaving the Netflix show, is that I don't really treat it as being that big of a disappointment, because ultimately I didn't see the sort of net benefit that this show was going to bring to the franchise, and now I feel them not being involved will bring a net benefit to the franchise and what they can offer to other projects. The show is still going to be a thing, so if it turns out great, fine. Otherwise, like, we can just, put it aside. Like most of the fandom puts aside the Last Airbender movie and doesn't care about it. This can sort of be treated that way as well, depending on how it turns out. And that's nice to be able to do. Whereas if Mike and Bryan were involved, there's a lot more discussions about, like, can we just, dismiss it or not? They're involved in it. What's going on there? So, yeah, they're my thoughts on it. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. The day after the big news, what are your thoughts on it now? Has it changed at all, or whatever? But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.